Hi everyone, my name is Holly Honorado, head of Edison Addiction Services. Today I'm here with my friend Joe. We're here today to talk about Smart Recovery. Smart Recovery is a wonderful alternative recovery program. It is an acronym which stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. SMART is a 4-point system, and our focus is on building and maintaining motivation, coping with urges, managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and living a balanced life. I love this program personally. I facilitate a weekly meeting at the Edison Library at 12 p.m. every Tuesday. I'd love to see some of you there. But right now, I'd like to introduce my friend Joe, and I'll let him tell you guys how we came to be friends.
Thank you, Holly. My name is Joe Peruta. I also facilitate SMART meetings at the North Edison Library. Our meetings start at 5 o'clock on Monday. And I got involved in SMART after I came out of IOP.
Can you tell our viewers what IOP stands for?
Sure. Intensive Outpatient Program.
Okay.
Basically what it is, nowadays a lot of people really don't have time to put a month away where 24/7 for a month period, they're out of the household. That just doesn't work. So now what they're doing is they're having stretches of 3 to 6 hours per day where they can still stay at home and whatnot. But during that period, they go through intense counseling. They go through group meetings, which are very beneficial. And all this gets the ball rolling. And I say ball rolling because this is really the IOP or any kind of initial program. It's just that, it's an initial program. But it needs to be followed up with various meetings, SMART, AA, and there's a number of other meetings out there. But you do need to take that step. When I was at the latter stages of my IOP, I realized I needed a program. I looked at various programs. And I came to the North Edison Library, and Holly was our facilitator. And I was immediately drawn to the meeting because, as she said, self-management and recovery training. I believe self-management for any addict is key. And I know we've discussed this many times. If you can't manage yourself, no one else is going to do it. Holly's been a great guide for me. She helped me in every aspect possible, but at the end of the day, the addict has to do the heavy lifting. And that's exactly the relationship we had. She guided me, but it was me who was dealing with the addiction. And forever grateful for Holly.
Thank you.
For what she did. And one of the things that I came to realize, and this is one of the reasons that I like SMART, because prior to being an alcoholic, and I was an alcoholic for about a 17-year period, I don't consider myself an alcoholic anymore. But prior to being an alcoholic, which started around, I would say 2005, prior to that, I was a compulsive eater. At one point, I weighed as much as 375 pounds. And in 2003, I had a gastric bypass. I lost a lot of weight after that. I got down to maybe 215 pounds. But shortly after that, within 2 years after the surgery, I needed something, some kind of addiction almost. And that's when I started drinking. And prior to that, I was never even considered a moderate drinker. And then all of a sudden, instead of eating the food, I was drinking the alcohol. And after I got out of IOP, maybe within 6 months, I realized that the addiction was just kind of a side effect from something else. I needed to go deeper. And for whatever reason, I had an epiphany, and I said to myself, okay, first it was food, then there's alcohol and cigarettes. What's next? Are you going to become a compulsive gambler? Are you going to get addicted to opiates? And that's when I realized that I need to go deeper than just putting out the fires of stop drinking or stop smoking or stop eating. I needed to kind of dive into myself. And again, Holly's been a big help with this. And I've had some other people. And I took a good look at myself. What was causing the addiction? And one of the things, and all the readings I've done, and one of the things I'm fairly proud of, is during the 17 years when I was drinking, I didn't complete one book. I didn't finish one book. The first 8 weeks after I stopped drinking, I finished about 10 books in an 8-week period. And I've been reading ever since. And a lot of these books that were recommended to me, a lot came from Holly, from other people in SMART and whatnot. And it just really had a profound impact on me. And one of the things I realized is that they estimate maybe 10% of people with an addiction actually recover from the addiction. Or if they recover from that, they move into another addiction.
Which is what I was going to
Okay.
expand upon. We see that a lot in
Yes.
smart recovery.
Yes.
So if someone is suffering from an addiction, it's very common for that to morph. You may have one thing under control, but if we have that addictive personality, it's very common for it to go into different avenues of addiction, different substances.
Absolutely, and I'm an example of that.
Yes.
And one of the things that I started to realize was the reason it's probably only 10% is because 90% of the people are just going to meetings. They're just trying to put out the immediate fire. As I stated earlier, they're not looking inwards. Okay? And I think that's when I started looking inwards at some issues that I was having. That's when the addiction almost, you could feel it kind of just, it had a profound effect on my body. I just felt a release of like stress and pain for years. And it was just a wonderful feeling. And the addiction of like fighting, not having a drink day to day, kind of evaporated. And that was no longer the issue. The issue was overcoming some maybe trauma or some problems I had throughout my life. And that's when the addiction started to really like just kind of free itself.
Yeah.
And the analogy I always use is, and I use this probably every meeting I have, is if a flower is not blooming, you don't fix the flower. You say, why is this flower not blooming? The first thing you do, you check the roots. Are the roots strong? The soil, is the soil nutritious enough? Is it getting enough rain? Is it getting enough sun? And that's really how I look at addiction, okay? If I'm having a problem with an addiction, well, is there something wrong with my roots? Okay, what's wrong with the root, the root of my problem? And that's kind of how I approached it. And I think that made all the difference for me. And that was generated because of SMART and because I had the privilege of working with Holly for so long.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure. So in your capacity as a SMART meeting facilitator, would you agree with the fact that 9 times out of 10, the addiction has to get worse and worse and worse? The lows get lower before change can actually occur?
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
would you feel comfortable telling our viewers a bit about what led to that change for you?
Well, for me, what happened was, I think June 2022, I have a picture of this. It was, at the time, I weighed around 340 pounds, so I was a little camera shy. But that was like the last picture of me while I was drinking. It was at my niece's wedding in Montauk, New York. A beautiful, beautiful place, right on the ocean. And I wasn't drinking at the actual event because all my family was there and whatnot. But I remember as soon as I got home, I started drinking. About a month later, my wife and my son went on a vacation to uh, Bermuda. We have 2 show dogs, and you can't really put them in a kennel. So I stayed at home to watch the 2 dogs. And during that time, I got so inebriated, I had a fall. I tripped, and from our kitchen to our family room, there's 2 steps. I was so inebriated, I fell, and all the weight came down on my left thigh. I ended up fracturing my femur. And again, I was out of shape at the time, 340 pounds, and the phone was on the other end of the room. It took me an hour and a half to crawl, to call for help. And this is how the mind of an addict works. I knew the ambulance was going to come and whatnot, and I was thinking, how long is it going to take them? Do I have time to smoke another cigarette before they get here? That's how desperate I was. And like every addict, when other people, family members, friends notice it, they'll approach them and they'll say, you know, maybe you should stop drinking. Maybe you should stop behaving this way. But until the addict is ready to come to you, there's only so much I can do. People tell me all the time, oh, my brother's having a problem, my friend's having a problem, can you talk to him? And as much as I want to help them, I know until they're willing to come to me, or willing to come to you, or willing to come to anyone who can offer them advice or help, it's not going to happen. I mean, we hear about it all the time of people who've been to rehab 15, 16, 20 times, and it doesn't stick. Until that person is ready, nothing's going to happen. And that's pretty unfortunate, because as much as I see it, I also know there's nothing I can do about it.
They have to have the willingness to change.
Yes.
And unfortunately, thank you for sharing that story. But from that point, I know that was the catalyst to which you were able to say enough, enough. Wind up in a hospital for prolonged amount of time when you have a lot of time to do some soul searching there, for sure.
Yes. And I think initially when I was in the hospital, I was going through withdrawals. And I just said to myself, you know what? You brought this on yourself. Suck it up and do it. I didn't want any medicine to help me. I just wanted to remember the pain. And to this day, it's a reminder. You don't want to go to that again. And I just got so stubborn. I just refused to take any pain medicine. I just, no, deal with it. So that was my mindset.
And I want to just commend you, because I've seen your growth and change, and it wasn't easy, but you took the bull by the horns. And just to inspire anyone out there who may be struggling, this is one example of a story, but for myself, I didn't have the luxury of going to a treatment center or IOP. Once a person has a willingness and their mindset is firm and rooted in change, that's all it takes. Smart Recovery or AA, any other group meeting is a good place to start if you're curious. They're free, they're accessible, many are online. So there's all different ways to go about finding and seeking help. If a person needs detox, they can do that just by going to the emergency room and getting some help that way too.
Absolutely. And I think the group dynamics is very helpful initially and really throughout the course of your life, because you sit in a room and you have these stories and you figure no one else can relate to what I've gone through. They can't believe I did something so stupid or I actually behaved like that. But I can tell stories about myself that were degrading and whatnot, and then you get a room full of people who say, oh yeah, I did the same thing. You know, so it is very refreshing, and it gives you like a lot of strength. Like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one who did this. Oh, I'm not the only one who got drunk and said something stupid.
Yeah.
Okay, so it happens to all of us.
Yes, and it's a great way to just build a community of support
Yes.
for yourself. As we always say, recovery is isolation.
Yes.
I mean, addiction is isolation, recovery is community. So just going to a meeting, meeting
Oh, yeah.
some cool, like-minded people, a judgment-free zone
Yes.
is what it's all about.
Absolutely.
So that being said, what are some things that you like about yourself in recovery?
Well, one of the things that actually I started to dive into myself and take a good look at myself. And one of the things, I was a people pleaser during this whole period of addiction and whatnot. I wanted people to like me. And one of the things that through the work I've been doing with someone, I kind of took a good look at myself. And I think a lot of people look at me, well, look, he stopped drinking. He lost 150 pounds. He stopped smoking. That's a success story. No, that in and of itself is not the success. The success is I found my own voice for the first time. And I'm 100 years old. I finally found my voice. And I realized that I have values. I stand for something. And in the past, I just kind of hid that away. And now I'm like, no, I'm proud to be me. I like me. I could never say that before. So to me, that's like my biggest accomplishment. And that to me is the most important thing that I've done. And of course, I think working with other people and giving back to other people, you see the difference that you make. And you realize that it's not hopeless. It can happen. And you can, and I mean, your story is every bit as similar as mine, like what you've accomplished and whatnot. But I just hope every addict that goes through this realizes, you know what, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You can do it. You have to put your work in. Okay, you're not gonna snap your fingers. And something I always say at SMART meetings when I indicated self-management and recovery training, I go with self-management. Okay, so if you're expecting me to say something brilliant, which is going to snap you out of your addiction, forget it. It's not going to happen. I'll guide you. I'll do whatever I can for you. But at the end of the day, and you told me this, is you have to do the heavy lifting yourself. No one can do that for you.
Yes, absolutely. And I would think just anyone watching this who is kind of questioning if they have a problem, where they're at, a good place to start is just to go over your hierarchy of values. What's important to you? What relationships are suffering as a result of this? What hobbies, what skills, what livelihoods are lacking because the addiction is taking the focal point? So there's many tools that we talk about in SMART, another being cost-benefit analysis.
Yes.
If anyone is
CPA.
wondering what this addiction is taking from them, you could do a simple exercise where you list the benefits of using that substance, whatever they may be, the actual benefits, and on the other side is the costs. So just getting that on paper, even just the first part of that exercise is
Absolutely.
really beneficial.
Absolutely.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah, and when I look at, every time I say, oh, I'll just have one more drink, and what it led to, and like I indicated earlier, how much reading I've done since I stopped, as opposed to what I was doing when I was drinking. And one of the points you brought up, and I think is very important, is isolation. The 17 years I was drinking, and it just got worse and worse, I kind of looked at myself like I was in a cocoon. Okay, now maybe the only decent decision I made when I was drunk was I didn't drink and drive. Okay, it's the only smart thing. So I didn't go to bars and drink. I didn't go to clubs, nothing like that. I pretty much sat on my front porch and I drank and I smoked and I had my iPod on. And I pretty much void of any conversation or whatever. I was just completely alone. And I said I look back like I was almost in a cocoon. And once you get out of it and you start, oh, okay, this is what it's like to have a conversation. And it is. Addiction very much is a disease of isolation. Really is.
Do you have any words of advice out for anyone out there who may be struggling right now in this moment?
The only thing, there is, as I mentioned, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And although the work is hard, it is so worth it. Just to wake up in the morning knowing that you don't need a drink, you don't need to smoke pot, you don't need an opiate, okay? You don't need to gamble. You don't need all the different vices that we have out there. And just to be free again, to have your mind to be free. It is just, it's better than being born again. And one of the things that Holly and I joked about, you know, when someone's struggling, it took me a fractured femur for me to get my act together. And I know when someone's struggling and they're still drinking, I'll joke with Holly, well, maybe we should fracture their femur. So, and maybe they'll turn around, but unfortunately sometimes it does take a life-altering event.
Or jail time, or
jail
other,
time, right.
which is also a life-altering event.
And I think we both know people who had accidents where that led to a fatality because they were drunk.
Yes.
And and for me, fortunately, I never made that choice. But if I ever injured someone or killed someone because of my addiction, I don't know if I could live with myself. For me, that would be the hardest thing.
Absolutely. And in summary, also, SMART is an abstinence-based program. If you're someone out there who's trying to make deals with yourself, as opposed to abstinence versus moderation, we know that doesn't really work. The lows will get lower until you are physically just worn down by the addiction and ready to change. So in closing, I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your story, for being a friend and a SMART recovery facilitator. I'd like to thank the Edison Library for allowing us space, and to reiterate, meetings are Tuesday, 12 p.m. Edison Main Library, Monday, 5 p.m. North Edison Branch. You can check out smartrecovery.org for online meetings. I'd also like to thank the mayor for allowing us to discuss this. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you again.
Thanks,
Joe.
Holly.
Bye-bye.